You got some clothes in your closet in your drawer there, boy? Yes, sir. And you asking me if I love you? Yeah. I mean, it was that way. And so then, now we're generationally, we're much more affectionate and saying that kind of thing. And you get down to the place now where we're giving kids trophies for just showing up, you know. Are you breathing today? Yes, you win! And so it swings, the pendulum swings back and forth, back and forth. Even periods of history, you know, you go to school, you study this stuff, okay, we're going to study the Dark Ages. The Dark Ages were dark. You look at that, and all the people were dying from all kinds of diseases, and feudalism was in control, and people were being oppressed, and all kinds of things. And you have the Middle Ages, you have the Renaissance period, you have the Enlightenment period. Go back to Greece and the Classical period. You come to the United States, and you get to the Industrial Age, followed by modernism, followed by postmodernism. On it goes. And so here we find ourselves evaluating these periods of time. What Jesus referred to in the book of Acts, maybe even in larger pieces, was called epochs. And here we have a situation where God is going to change everything from what it has become when sin and rebellion against God came into the world, and the world was destroyed spiritually and horribly affected in every way. I mean, we have no perception at all of what the world was like before the fall. And I think one day when we see in this world, on this earth, this time when Jerusalem is going to be called the city of truth, and the world will be restored during the 1,000-year reign of Christ, we're going to be amazed at just what things were like then. But as each generation goes on this journey, and they are counting on the fact that God is with us, that the reality of Jesus, that the forgiveness of God, that His graciousness toward us is real, and it's meaningful. It changes us. That this is what every generation needs to know. But one of the things that we often miss is in the mishmash of what's going on each season, there are distractions. I don't know about you, but last year one of the big distractions, it was everywhere on Facebook. And you know, the world revolves around Facebook and all that. And so you have to know what's going on there. They were talking about the fact December the 25th is not when Jesus was born. You know what? I got no problem with that. Is that the main point? That we know exactly the day that Jesus was born? Or is the point that Jesus came to the earth? As the Son of God, He left heaven. He left all of the things that you and I think of when we think about God and His majesty and His glory, and He became one of us. And He dealt with this life and this sin and this world and the oppression. And so whether it was December the 25th or 26th or January the 3rd, the point is this. As God looked into the creation, He was going to create time. He was going to create existence in time. And He knew everything by foreknowledge was going to happen. He chose to come, to put on flesh, to be a sacrifice for our sin. In John chapter 1, beginning in verse 1, as you think about in the beginning was the Word, you're going to know, you already know, most of you, that the Word here is referring to Jesus Himself. The living Word of God. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now, to create a cult, all you have to do is take little letters and put them here and there. You could create your own Bible by putting here, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was a God. And you've created a cult. And that actually happened in the New World Translation that's out there today. They throw in the little letter A, and they create a whole cultic situation by making themselves gods. Whatever it is you want to say, the devil is always looking to interfere with the work of God's grace and God's truth in every generation, in every time and place. And so we have to get our sight, our perception, our vision on the reality of what God is saying. That Jesus was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through Him. Apart from Him, nothing came into being that has come into being. How important is Jesus in this picture? This is why we celebrate the birth of Christ. It's because God chose to step into history and to change the course of history and to include all of those who would respond in faith to Christ. Now in John chapter 1 verse 4, as you see, in Him was life. Now if you want to know the source of life, not just physical life, spiritual life, Jesus is the source. In Him was life, and life was the light of men. The light shines in darkness, the darkness did not comprehend it. Folks, we are still there today. And it's going to remain that way. How many of you know you've actually considered the possibility that your flesh, your being, aside from Christ, would be entirely wicked? Ask your wife, she'll say yes, it's true. The reality is, folks, aside from Jesus, we might do some good things, but we are in our hearts and in our minds not people who pursue God. We are pursued by Him. And so God had to do this on our behalf. He had to reach out. He had to bring righteousness. He had to have the sacrifice for sin. Because we are in darkness without Jesus. He is the light of men. And so as we think about Christmas, we think about this reality. In verse 6, it goes on to tell us there that John, who was a regular guy like you, like me, called for the purpose of pointing out Jesus. That was his goal. That was the purpose of his life. How much is my life and how much is your life as a follower of Jesus Christ like John the Baptist? Because that is the goal and purpose of my life in the world, is to point people to Jesus. To let people know who He is and what He's about. And so you take my little piece of life, in all of prehistory, history, and eternity into the future, you drop me in there. Why does my life matter? Because God has given me the opportunity to point to Jesus. To know Him, to experience Him, to walk with Him. And so if your life is not pointing to Jesus, if it's not focused on Him, then you may be missing the reality of the importance of your own existence. Not just the things about God, but why are you even here? And so John played this role. And it talks about John being a little confusing as you read. Some of the people thought maybe he was the Messiah. No, he was in the world, and Jesus was in the world, and the world was made through Him, and the world did not know Him. John was simply pointing to Christ. In verse 11, it says, Jesus came to His own, and those who were His own didn't receive Him. What would you think? And this would be often the case, maybe sometimes with our kids. If you tell them, okay, dinner's at 6, and it's at 6. And so it's at 6, and we're having dinner at 6. Okay. And so about 6:30, 7 o'clock, they come straggling in, and you say, didn't you hear me say that dinner is at 6? Okay. So here's the problem. God told the Jewish people what to be watching for in Messiah, and down to the very time that He would be coming, what kinds of things would be going on in the world. If they didn't get the birth of Christ, that wasn't the crucial part. But Daniel tells us right down to the very date when Jesus was going to make a triumphal entry into Jerusalem. And guess what? They missed it. They missed it because we are in darkness. Aside from Jesus, we don't have anything to recommend us to God. And so that's the news that we have to share today as we go out to the world to say God has chosen us. He loved us. He has done what was needed to bring us salvation, to bring us forgiveness of sin, to bring us eternal life. So how does he do that? Well, what does verse 12 say? But as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God, even to those who believe. Not believe like Santa or the tooth fairy, or no. Believe like, how much do you believe in the reality that there's going to be air the next time your lungs go to breathing in? That kind of belief. You're trusting entirely to God, that by trusting him and believing in him and what he has done for us through his son Jesus, that we can become children of God. Now people say, oh, well, everybody's a child of God. Grab a Coke and we'll all drink a Coke and well, teach the world to sing. And okay, folks, there's a sense that God made us all, but not all of us are children of God in the sense of spiritual life. And it makes a difference. Because people who belong to God in that sense have been born, not of blood, nor of their own will, the will of the flesh, not of the will of grandma or someone else, the will of man, but they have been born again by God himself. And folks, you don't get birth without knowing that it's happened. Man, that's why God don't let babies remember stuff. You know what I'm saying? Can you imagine? Get me out of here! I mean, it's like, you don't want to remember this stuff. You know something's going on, right? And spiritual birth is one of those situations that is like God meets you and he makes you aware of the fact that you're a sinner like everyone else, that we all need forgiveness, that we all need Christ to be a child of God. And so, as you look at verse 14, where we were reading earlier, we get this last little piece of knowledge, and the Word became flesh. This is the reality of Jesus. The Word of God, God's Son, God himself in the flesh, came here. It's not about ho, 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 or jingle bells, or snowfall. We were decorating our house, and yesterday was a great day for decorating. I think Gwen was up here decorating. Everybody got a chance maybe to decorate, because you couldn't go outside without draining. And so, as we're decorating, I think, oh, well, there's Christmas music on cable. So I go to that channel. There it is, Christmas music. Turn it on. I let it run for a while. I never heard a Christmas song once. Not one. I heard about sleigh bells, and I heard about ho-ho, and I heard about all kinds of winter and that sort of thing. And you know what kind of difference that understanding of Christmas makes in the life of people? No difference at all. It hypes us up to a materialistic part of the year where families try to get along, and often they're not able to do so. And the toys and the gifts and all that stuff happen, and then there's nothing left but bills. Because there's no reality of a spiritual hope of change, that we see the glory of God, the glory as of the only begotten of Father, full of grace and truth, Jesus coming. And so here's John the Baptist, who testifies about him and cries out saying, this was he whom I said, he comes after me as a higher rank than I, for he existed before me. So John's not saying Jesus existed before me like I was born a week before him, he was born a week before me. No, we're talking about the eternal Son of God. And so he is pointing to Jesus today. My question is am I pointing to Jesus today in my own life and in the lives of the people around me? Do I think about the fact that he has existed through all of time? For of his fullness we have received grace upon grace. Undeserved favor of God beyond, again, the undeserved favor of God and the undeserved favor of God over and over again because of what Jesus has done. In verse 17, it says that the law, you know, the Ten Commandments and all that stuff that we sometimes try to live by as Christians rather than moving to the next level, which is the law of love and the Spirit of God. It takes us up a level. It doesn't do away with the law. It has us living by the spirit and intent of the law rather than the rules. The law was given through Moses, but grace and truth, and there's that word again, truth, were realized through Jesus Christ. No one has seen God at any time. The only begotten God who is in the bosom of the Father, Jesus has explained him. Jesus came to let us know who God was and what he was about. Now, to talk about this more fully and to get this eternal perspective, we really need to look at Colossians, because we can spend these next weeks talking about the story of Jesus' birth, but we have to understand that this was something that goes back through all before time, that Jesus rescued us, the Father rescued us from the domain of darkness and transferred us to the kingdom of his beloved Son. This was what God was planning to do. You want to understand why we're going to celebrate the birth of Christ. It's because Jesus came to take us out of the domain of darkness and put us in the kingdom of himself, of the Son of God. Where do we find forgiveness? Where do we find redemption? We find